You're talking about the emissions reduction target. I'm also focusing on the renewable energy target of 82% by 2030. That is way off. We're talking about, that at 42% at the moment. So don't you need to look at the gap between those two targets? We're bringing emissions down. We're promised, the target to get renewables up is just nowhere near it. So how we, that's to me says, okay, we're getting emissions down, renewables aren't doing it. And aren't we kind of pulling the wool over the Australian people's eyes by saying, well, we've got these targets, but actually renewables aren't going to do it, so it's going to have to be base load. Isn't there just kind of an honesty degree in all of this?
Look, I think the target that really matters is actually how much carbon is going into the atmosphere.
Well, not really, Allegra, because
that,
I mean, if the renewables aren't where they need to be in 2030, I mean, doesn't that tell us that something else is going to have to fill that gap, and it's going to be really expensive?
No, I think the target that matters is, I think, the 2030 target of total emissions, and the renewables feeds into that. And so, I agree, we're not building renewables as fast as we need to. And so the job is to build them faster, so that we can put renewables into the system, because we know, frankly, that the cheapest form of new energy, when the coal plants and everything close down in the next 10 years, many of them are at the end of life, the cheapest form of new energy is firmed renewables. That's where we need to go. That is the cheapest form for our families and our businesses. And so we need to really deliver on that. And that's should be the 100% focus of the community. But instead, I'd say that Dutton and the party are undermining, that move to renewables. And we need to make that change.
Look, sure, if you accept that, yeah, and I do accept that, so I'm with you on that. But also, what is not being talked about is a really hard bit, and that is the perhaps 10 or 20% that wind and solar cannot cover because they're intermittent nature, batteries aren't up to speed, green hydrogen is not economically viable at the moment. So when are we going to talk about that 10 to 20%? Because that's the glue. You can't just ignore that, because otherwise the whole energy system collapses, doesn't it?
And for me, this is why we're talking about a transition. Not, I've never been one of those people, turn them off tomorrow, let's go ahead. I'm saying this is a transition, absolutely. We do have states, South Australia, Tasmania, and the ACT that are already, meeting that 80% renewables. But I'm not saying get to 100% by 2030, because frankly, we don't.
But they're also relying on baseload
power
from the other East Coast markets in other states as well.
Look, there's a combination piece. We have to make this work together. It is a transition. It's not easy. It's not simple. And frankly, it'd been great if we had started 15 years ago, but we haven't. But we are making progress. And in terms of the renewables, we're now just under 40% renewables across the East Coast grid. And that is a really positive step. So we're making progress. We need to stay the course. We need to accept that this isn't a simple transition, but it is the right transition for our kids. And it is the transition that we as a country can make.
Look, I think that most people accept that, but when you get into the detail, it's a little bit more complicated. I know you know that, Allegra, but when we talk, if I could bring it back to Peter Dutton and the 2030 target, he's probably right that we're not going to meet it. And I don't want to just talk about the 42 v 43%, but you've got to look at the renewables aspect of it. And actually, there's a UN report that says, in fact, no G20 nation is currently on the right trajectory to meet those targets. So we're not alone in all of this. I'm just trying to work out what the big problem is in highlighting that we're probably not going to get there.
Well, because I think the question is then so firstly, I'm going to come back to that renewables piece, because the point is the Paris Agreement has nothing to do with the 82% renewables. The Paris Agreement is all about the 43%, and it's the question of how.
Sure, and, but you can't ignore that piece, because
no, you can't ignore it. But it's a sector that drives in, but it is not the only thing. So you could say, well, look, do we need to do more in relation to stop deforestation?
Yeah,
because that
about
can
offsets
actually get us to 43. Yeah, well, it's to stop deforestation, or can actually help us reach that 43%. So for me, my eye on the prize is on that 43%. But I think we've got challenges, but we need to drive towards that. And I'd call Peter Dutton on the fact that, you can say, oh, look, we're not going to meet anyway. He's just pointing that out. He is also driving an opposition that is voted against every single piece of climate legislation that the Parliament has put forward. Things that, fuel efficiency standards, which Tesla and Toyota supported, and the Business Council.
And Chris Bowen ended up watering down.
He watered it down a little bit, but everyone is on board now. The safeguard mechanism, which all the major industry groups got on board with.
Yeah.
So the truth is,
which is also driving up prices.
No, it's not driving up prices.
I mean, it's the context of this now is that we're in a cost of living crisis. And we weren't in a cost of living crisis a couple of years ago when these commitments have made. Does there need to be a recalibration?
Well, look, I'm so alive to this, and I hear about these concerns every single day, about people's concerns on power bills and on housing and on, say, insurance bills. But let's look at the numbers. Why have our power bills gone up? It's because there was a war in Ukraine, and Australia has high gas and coal prices because of that war in Ukraine. So it's a fossil fuel driven price increase in energy. If you had solar on your roof and a battery in your garage, you have not had high energy prices. So what we need to do is help more Australians get that reliability and lower energy costs. If you're worried about your insurance premiums going up, the reason why they're going up is because of climate related natural disasters. We know that those are increasing, and we know that makes more of Australian households vulnerable to floods, fires and storms. So the answer is not to sort of backtrack from this. The answer is to say, look, how do we help families right now, get more reliable and cheaper and cleaner power? Let's do that. How do we help families, work on insurance premiums, frankly, change the taxes that are on insurance premiums, because in New South Wales, about 40% of insurance premiums are taxes. So I'll get back to my favourite topic, which is tax reform. Laura, but, there are other things that we should be doing right now that are really about, helping Australian households. Yeah. But it is not, the answer is not to stop the transition, because the cheapest form of new energy is renewable energy. So if you're trying to help people with their power bills, it's not to commit to nuclear, because we know that is the most expensive form of energy and will be the most expensive form of energy, going forward.
Okay, well, we will talk tax reform soon. I too like that topic. We'll have to leave it there. Allegra, we'll see you soon.
Bye.